Anybody have a question first from what you've heard? Yeah, please. Craig? Yep.
Actually, to David, I think it was. It sounds like your product disintermediate a lot of revenue for your partners. I don't quite understand. While it sounds great for the users, why some of the big companies would want to disintermediate their own large systems that they sell for a bunch of money.
Well, that's an issue, and it does take a little while for them to buy into that. I mean, most of the partners that we have, you know, it was a 2-year process to get the partnership underway. But they also see the writing on the wall that this technology is going to happen. And so they would rather play a role in it than to not be in it. And what this is going to do is the commodity tests are going to move out really to the patient side. The bread and butter tests, the esoteric tests are still, which are big money makers, are still there. So I you know, it's taken for a while for them to say, yeah, no, we know it's going to go there, and we want to play.
Let me ask a follow-up to that. This is a MedTech conference. Diagnostics is sort of a subset within medical devices, the traditional medical devices. There's a lot of experience here, actually, on the medical device side, too, I think. I'm curious, what do you think is the key to success on the diagnostic side? Is it different than medical devices? How is it different? And how do you, what does a company need to accomplish to really get acquired on the diagnostic side? I know we have had some very successful exits here with a couple gentlemen on the ends in particular.
Well, yeah, they're both, I mean, diagnostics company are device companies, right? And there are device companies like I have that is not FDA regulated. So if you want to franchise what Integrated Diagnostics is doing, you can kit it, put it on an appropriate platform. Right now, there are no platforms that could do that, but that would be an FDA test, FDA cleared type test. But I think in the larger sense of diagnostics, you have a lot of sales channels, access issues. We have it, of course, in the clinical reference lab. I think it is probably as acute on both of the device companies, because as everybody consolidates, it gets more difficult for you to get the big companies' attention because maybe they don't have to innovate. They have a lot of cash, as we saw. Maybe their shareholders aren't worried about their growth rate. But it's challenging, for sure.
If I can jump in here. So I agree with what Al said. I'd say that there's some nuanced differences, largely around reimbursement, around regulation. In terms of the second part of your question, what it takes to attract an M&A transaction, or an exit, I should say, be it IPO or strategic, I'd say there's one recurring theme throughout the diagnostic space, and I think actually all three companies here are pretty well represented at that. And to Al's point, that to the extent that you kit your test and you're selling it to the labs rather than doing it in-house as a CLIA model, I think that the dirty little secret in diagnostics is that automation wins. It's really that simple. If you are competing against someone who has a process that has more interactive steps in it versus one that has automation, typically the automated platform wins that battle. And that's in large part because we've seen a lot of pressure around lab techs. There's a lot more demand for them than there are lab techs. So in part, we've seen a 20-year conversion from labor dollars into capital dollars within diagnostics. And so some great examples would be Dade Behring in immuno and general chemistry, GenProbe in molecular diagnostics, as well as Ventana Medical in tissue processing. And the other thing that these three companies have in common is that they're no longer public, or, well, GenProbe won't be for much longer anyway.
Sundu, do you want to add anything?
Yeah. I think, I don't know if there's anything super different about diagnostic companies in terms of what makes them attractive. I think it comes back to the same couple things. You have to show that you have a sustainable business model, and you have to have good operating cash flows, and that comes from having a razor blade model. And most diagnostic companies are selling razor blades. They are in the process of selling systems, but the systems, like Al pointed out, only go so far as to the menu that you want to put on it. And so building a comprehensive menu is very important. And I think demonstrating that the platform that you are selling is truly a platform, it's not a one-trick pony, is important. And I think it's kind of unique that you can potentially have two different business models. One is the FDA model, and one is the CLIA lab model. The difference to me is that the CLIA lab model, you have a clinical utility issue that you have to demonstrate. And with the FDA model, typically systems that fall into the better, faster, cheaper bucket typically go through the better, FDA model.
Okay. Any other questions out here? I think Doug has one next. Anybody else? Okay, Doug, do you want to?
I can fire off adding on to the M&A question. So most of the M&A has been with kind of platform models up until now. And you've seen CLIA success from IPO basically with genomic health. Do you think that's going to be do you guys, and I'd like each of your opinions, do you think that's going to be the trend moving forward, or do you see a lot of the big guys starting to buy CLIA labs as well?
Well, I don't think the big guys are going to buy CLIA labs. I think they're going to buy the content and then convert it to their platform. So for the molecular genetic companies like Genomic Health, they are ripe for acquisition by a gene sequencing company, because you can take what they've done, systematize it, kit it, and then get global distribution like that, and still possibly keep a CLIA front end to help drive new tests, which have to go through the missionary selling cycle, the reimbursement cycle, and stuff like that. And also realizing that when you leave your CLIA model, you're only going to capture about 20% of the price that you used to get when you were selling the full service model.
We've certainly seen some interest from multinational companies in the CLIA model. GE, for example, bought Clariant last year. Novartis went and bought Diagnostics. To Al's point, though, I agree. I think in general, most of these transactions, or any future transactions on the CLIA lab side of things, will likely have some proprietary content to them. Building a CLIA lab and selling it for a premium multiple, I think is going to get a little more difficult in the future, particularly, as I noted in my earlier prepared comments, given some of the challenges with code stacking essentially going away. I mean, for all intents and purposes, if you're designing a new diagnostic, you have to start thinking about either the traditional CPT code route, or you're talking to McKesson and Palmetto about getting a Z code.
On the acquisition side, we're seeing a lot of activity by the technology companies, the Sonys, the Samsungs. As the diagnostics become less wet and more of as a small little device, as a piece of something, actually the way that we refer it as really a digitizer, is that it digitizes the information in the blood. We think that actually a lot of the technology companies are moving. In fact, the most aggressive companies that we're seeing right now are the technology companies, because the medical space is such a need worldwide in the emerging countries that it's an opportunity, and so they will go a little bit, now that they're becoming a little cleaner diagnostics, I think they'll be moving more into acquiring more of these companies.
I agree. I think they're going to be bought, if they're going to be bought for their content, not necessarily for the platform that they've put into place. But we also heard a lot about companies trying to own a disease today, and that may be one option for a therapeutic company that's making an oncological drug, to own the diagnostic that goes along with it, like the Genomic Health of the world.
Any other questions before we fire another one off?
Everybody asleep? Wake up, wake up.
So I can fire off one last one, which is, there are a number of hot areas: diagnostics, sequencing, companion diagnostics, other biomarker strategies. And I'd love to ask the panel, what do you think are going to be the hottest areas over the next couple years? And you can't say your own company.
I think it's going to be sequencing moving to the clinical lab. It's already there, and I think it's driving content that comes from sequencing. Some of it will be already proven, like, for example, maybe a genomic health type thing or an XDX type test for XDX for transplant, genomic for prognostic breast. But I think that's the wave of the future in terms of pathology-based work. And then fast forward a little more, and then you get the proteomic and the metabolomic portions of the body that are also going to be interrogated, and they're going to add a new dimension to all this. And as you go up from genomics to proteomics, the information content goes up dramatically. Because if you think about it, you have a gene turns on, gets processed, lots of things can turn it on and off, but when you finally get a protein, the protein's there for a very important reason. And that's why when you interrogate protein networks, it's crucial and you can find out a lot of stuff. So that's my bias. Of course, I already pitched my company again, but so.
I don't want to deviate too much from that. I'd say healthcare investment banking. I'd actually, in some respects, agree with what Al said. We do see over the next 5 years sequencing moving very aggressively into cancer resequencing. Obviously, cancer is a disease of the genome, and so we're already seeing some really interesting work coming out of a number of institutions, not the least of which is WashU. I think that will likely expand beyond DNA into RNA, into the epigenome, eventually the metabolome as well, and also into different disease states. Certainly, I think sequencing doesn't start and stop with cancer. I think certainly some autoimmune diseases are also ripe for this type of approach.
And I guess I would agree with Al. I mean, basically.
You're not a controversial panel.
Sundu, take it up.
Yeah, I'll see if I can be a little bit controversial. I think each of them has a place. We are in the process of, I think that sequencing has its place, but I'm not sure that sequencing is going to be the solution for every diagnostic. And there's going to be a definite place. Sequencing is going to continue to accelerate the discovery of markers, and then it becomes an issue of what is the best platform to put that assay on. If it's a matter of, I think sequencing is going to give microarrays a run for their business, but I'm not sure that there's always going to be translational issues. There's going to be expression levels that you'll have to monitor. And so I still see real-time PCR playing a significant role in diagnostics.
So are there any more questions from the audience? Well, if not, then I'd like to thank the panelists for coming out.